A black teenager was mocked on his first day at work, but what he did in front of the company owner left everyone speechless. Marcus Johnson stood at the bus stop at 6:15 a.m., his heart pounding against his ribs. The early summer air was already thick with humidity, making his freshly ironed white shirt cling uncomfortably to his back. He checked his phone again, still an hour and 45 minutes until his first day at Wilson & Associates marketing agency would officially begin. "Baby, you are gonna wear out that phone screen," his mother had teased earlier that morning, watching him obsessively check the time while she made him breakfast. The memory of her tired but proud smile made his chest tighten. The night before played back in his mind as he waited for the bus. "Hold still, Marcus," his mother had said, carefully pressing the iron against his only white dress shirt. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion after a double shift at the hospital, but she'd insisted on ironing his shirt herself. "Your first impression matters." "Mama, I can do it myself," he'd protested weakly, watching her meticulous movements. "Not today, you can't," she'd replied with a soft laugh. "Today is special. My baby boy's first step into the corporate world." His little sister Tanya had bounced around them in her pajamas, full of questions. "Will you have your own office, Marcus? Will they give you a computer? Can I visit?" The bus's squealing brakes yanked Marcus back to the present. He touched his tie one last time. A YouTube tutorial had taught him how to tie it properly after 3 frustrating hours of practice the previous week. The blue tie had been his father's, one of the few things they still had of him. Marcus tried not to think about how his dad would never see this moment. Inside the bus, Marcus pulled out his worn laptop, a graduation gift that still made him emotional when he thought about it. His whole family had pitched in. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even his grandmother's church friends. He opened it, reviewing some of his practice designs one last time. "That's some nice work, young man." Marcus looked up, startled. An elderly black woman in nursing scrubs was peering at his screen with interest. "Thank you, ma'am," he replied politely. "First day?" she asked, noting his formal attire. "Yes, ma'am. Marketing internship downtown." Her face brightened. "Lord, that takes me back. My grandson just finished his first year at design school. Keep your head up, baby. Remember, you belong there just as much as anyone else." Marcus nodded, grateful for the encouragement but too nervous to maintain the conversation. As the bus drove deeper into downtown, the buildings grew taller, their glass surfaces reflecting the morning sun. This was a different world from his neighborhood, one of swift-walking people in expensive suits, luxury cars, and coffee shops charging $6 for a basic cup of coffee. At 7:45 a.m., Marcus stood before the Wilson & Associates building, a sleek 20-story structure that made him feel smaller than ever. He took a deep breath, remembering his mother's words from that morning. "You've got more talent in your little finger than most people have in their whole body. Don't let anyone make you forget that." The lobby was all marble and glass, his worn sneakers squeaking slightly against the polished floor. Marcus approached the security desk, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "Good morning. I am Marcus Johnson. It's my first day. I am the new design intern." The security guard, an older white man with kind eyes, checked his list. "Ah, yes, Mr. Johnson. Here is your temporary badge. Take the elevator to the 12th floor. Miss Chen will meet you there." In the elevator, Marcus caught his reflection in the mirrored walls. The white shirt was crisp, thanks to his mother's efforts, the blue tie straight, his short dreadlocks neat and professional. But his shoes, the only pair he owned, were visibly worn. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to hide them behind each other. The elevator opened to a bustling office floor. People rushed back and forth, carrying coffee cups and tablets, engaged in rapid-fire conversations about deadlines and client meetings. The energy was electric, intimidating, and exciting all at once. "Marcus? Marcus Johnson?" A young Asian woman in a smart blazer approached him with a warm smile. "I am Sarah Chen. We spoke on the phone. Welcome to Wilson & Associates." "Thank you, Miss Chen. I really appreciate this opportunity." "Please, call me Sarah. Let me show you around before we get you settled at your desk." As they walked through the office, Sarah pointed out different departments and introduced him to various team members. Most smiled politely or nodded before returning to their work. Marcus tried to remember everyone's names, but it was overwhelming. "And this is our creative team area," Sarah explained, leading him to an open space with several desks. "You'll be working here with our other designers." That's when Marcus first heard them, two men in expensive suits standing by the water cooler, not quite whispering. "Guess they're really taking this diversity thing seriously now," one said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Wonder if he'll be serving coffee or cleaning the bathrooms?" the other replied with a smirk. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. She'd heard them too. "Marcus, let me introduce you to Tom Phillips and Jerome Barrett. They're junior account executives." The two men turned, their faces arranged in perfect masks of professional courtesy. "Welcome aboard," Tom said, not extending his hand. His eyes flickered to Marcus's shoes before meeting his gaze with barely concealed contempt. Jerome just nodded, already turning back to his conversation. Marcus felt his face burn, but he remembered his mother's words. Your dignity isn't determined by their ignorance. He managed a polite thank you before following Sarah to his desk. "Here is your workspace," Sarah said, her voice gentle. "I am sorry about. Well, not everyone here is like that." Marcus forced a smile. "It's okay. I am here to learn and work hard." Sarah showed him how to log into the computer system and explained some basic office procedures. As she talked, Marcus noticed more subtle looks and whispers from passing employees. Some were merely curious, others clearly disapproving. "The morning meeting starts in 10 minutes, Sarah explained. "It's where we discuss ongoing projects and assignments. Don't worry about speaking up today. Just observe and get a feel for how things work." Left alone at his desk, Marcus pulled out his laptop again. He opened his portfolio, dozens of designs he'd created during countless sleepless nights, teaching himself through YouTube videos and free online courses. Each piece represented hours of work, determination, and hope. "Nice paperweight," Tom's voice came from behind him. "But we use real computers here, kid. This isn't the library." Marcus's hands clenched under his desk, but he kept his voice steady. "It gets the job done." "We'll see about that," Jerome chimed in, walking past. "Hope you can do more than make Instagram posts." As they walked away laughing, Marcus thought about the countless nights he'd spent in the public library, maximizing his 2-hour computer time limit, watching tutorial after tutorial. He thought about the weekends spent practicing instead of hanging out with friends, the early mornings reading design blogs on his phone during his bus ride to school. The morning meeting was held in a large conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marcus sat quietly in the back, taking notes on his phone since he hadn't been issued a company laptop yet. He noticed Tom and Jerome shooting glances his way whenever anyone mentioned upcoming projects. Different team leaders discussed their current work, using terms Marcus had only read about online. He wrote down unfamiliar words to look up later, determined to learn everything he could. "And finally," Sarah said, standing up, "I'd like to officially welcome our new design intern, Marcus Johnson. He'll be with us for the summer, learning and contributing to our creative team." All eyes turned to Marcus. He stood briefly, noting the range of expressions, from genuine welcome to open skepticism. "Great, another diversity hire," he heard someone mutter, followed by muffled laughter. After the meeting, Marcus returned to his desk, his mind racing with everything he needed to learn. He opened his laptop again, determined to prove himself through his work. "Hey, new kid," a voice called out. It was Dave, one of the senior designers Sarah had introduced earlier. "We're heading to lunch. Want to join?" Before Marcus could respond, Tom walked by. "Come on, Dave. He probably can't afford those fancy lunch spots you like." Dave's face reddened. I mean, "It's okay," Marcus said quietly. "I brought lunch. Thank you for the offer." He watched them leave, then pulled out the sandwich his mother had packed. Sitting alone at his desk, he opened his design software and began practicing with the company's brand guidelines. determined to master every detail. The afternoon dragged on, filled with more subtle jabs and not-so-accidental shoulder bumps when people walked past his desk. Marcus focused on his screen, remembering his little sister's words that morning. "You are going to be the best designer they ever saw, big brother." Around 3 p.m., Sarah stopped by his desk. "How are you holding up?" Marcus managed a smile. "Learning a lot." She hesitated, then said softly, "Listen, Marcus, some people here, they might take time to adjust, but your portfolio is impressive. That's why you are here. Don't let anyone make you think differently." As the day wound down, Marcus gathered his things, exhausted but determined. He had survived day one. Walking to the elevator, he overheard Tom and Jerome again. "Bet he doesn't last a week. $50 says he quits by Friday." Marcus straightened his shoulders and kept walking. On the bus ride home, he thought about everything he'd observed, every snide comment, every dismissive look. But instead of discouraging him, it all crystallized into pure determination. His phone buzzed, a text from his mom. "How was your first day, baby?" Marcus stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "It was interesting, Mama, but I am ready for tomorrow." When he got home, his mother and Tanya were waiting with his favorite dinner, mac and cheese with extra cheese, just the way he liked it. "Tell us everything," Tanya bounced in her chair. Marcus looked at their eager faces and made a decision. He wouldn't tell them about the mockery, the dismissal, the subtle and not so subtle racism. Instead, he described the beautiful office, the exciting projects he'd seen, the skills he hoped to learn. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table with his laptop. He opened his design software and began working on personal projects, pushing himself to be better, faster, more creative. "I belong there," he whispered to himself, his father's tie hanging on the back of his chair. "And I am going to prove it." The clock struck midnight as Marcus continued working, unaware that the next day would bring a challenge that would either break him or define his future at Wilson and Associates. For now, he was just a 17-year-old boy with a dream, determined to turn every mockery into motivation, every sneer into strength. In the quiet of the kitchen, with only the hum of his laptop fan and distant city noises keeping him company, Marcus Johnson prepared for battle, not with fists or harsh words, but with talent, determination, and the unwavering belief that excellence is the best response to ignorance. The next morning, Marcus arrived even earlier. The security guard, whose name he'd learned was Bill, greeted him with a friendly nod. "Early bird gets the worm, eh, son?" "Yes, sir. Just trying to get a head start." "Keep that attitude," Bill said warmly. "Been here 15 years, seen all kinds come and go, the ones who make it? They're the ones who show up early, stay late, and keep their heads high no matter what." Marcus took those words to heart as he rode the elevator up. The office was nearly empty at 7:30 a.m., just a few early risers setting up for the day. He used the quiet time to study more tutorials on his laptop, pausing only when he heard familiar voices approaching. "Man, he's here already?" Jerome's voice carried across the empty office. "Probably slept here because he couldn't afford the bus fare home." Marcus pretended not to hear, focusing instead on his screen. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Packed your favorite lunch today. Remember what Grandma always says, success is the sweetest revenge." More employees started filtering in. A young woman from the creative team, Lisa, he remembered, stopped by his desk. "Hey Marcus, want some coffee? I am making a fresh pot." Before he could answer, Tom walked by. "Careful, Lisa. He might think you are offering him a job as the coffee boy." Lisa's face flushed. She opened her mouth to say something, then walked away quickly, avoiding Marcus's eyes. The morning meeting was about to start when Sarah rushed to Marcus's desk, looking flustered. "Marcus, do you have a minute?" He followed her to her office, noticing Tom and Jerome watching with interest. "I hate to do this to you," Sarah began, "but we have a situation. James, our senior designer, just quit. No notice, nothing. Just an email saying he's taken another job. Marcus nodded, unsure where this was going. We have a major client presentation tomorrow morning. The Blackwell account. They need a complete rebranding package, logo, business cards, letterhead, social media templates, everything. James was supposed to handle it, but now. She looked at him apologetically. I know it's only your second day, but would you be willing to take a look at it? Even if you can just get started, anything would help. From outside the office, they heard Jerome's loud voice. Oh, this is going to be good. The diversity hire handling the Blackwell account? I give him 2 hours before he crashes and burns. Sarah's face hardened. Ignore them. I've seen your portfolio. You have real talent. But I understand if this is too much too soon. Marcus thought about his mother ironing his shirt, his sister's faith in him, Bill's early morning wisdom. He thought about every sneer, every whisper, every dismissive glance. I'll do it, he said quietly. What's the deadline? Tomorrow, 9 a.m. The client will be here in person. Sarah hesitated. Marcus, are you sure? This is a lot of pressure. I am sure. His voice was stronger now. Can you send me the brief and any existing material? As he walked back to his desk, he heard Tom and Jerome making bets on how quickly he'd fail. But for the first time, their words didn't sting. He had something to prove now, not just to them, but to himself. Opening his email, he found the project brief from Sarah. The Blackwell Group was a prestigious law firm looking to modernize their image while maintaining their traditional values. They wanted something classic but contemporary, professional but approachable. Marcus cracked his knuckles and got to work. This wasn't just an assignment anymore, it was his chance to show everyone exactly what he was capable of. The morning turned into afternoon. Marcus worked through lunch, barely touching his mother's carefully packed sandwich. He was in his element now, losing himself in the work, barely noticing the occasional paper balls that landed on his desk or the continued commentary from Tom and Jerome's corner. Around 4 p.m., Dave from the creative team stopped by again. How's it going, kid? Need any help? Marcus showed him some initial concepts. Dave's eyebrows rose. Damn, he whispered. This is actually really good. Where did you learn to? Don't encourage him, Dave, Tom interrupted, walking past. When this blows up tomorrow, you don't want your name anywhere near it. Dave stepped back, looking apologetic. Just good luck, Marcus. As the office began emptying out for the day, Sarah stopped by. Marcus, you should head home too. Get some rest. We can pick this up again tomorrow. If it's okay, he said, not looking up from his screen. I'd like to stay a bit longer. I am in a good flow right now. Sarah hesitated. The cleaning crew comes at 9. I'll be done by then. She left him with a concerned look, but Marcus barely noticed. He was in the zone, his fingers flying over the keyboard, each design decision purposeful and precise. The office grew quiet, then silent, until only the hum of the air conditioning and the click of his mouse remained. His phone buzzed. His mother. Baby, where are you? It's getting late. Working on a big project, Mama. Don't wait up. Did you eat? Marcus looked at his untouched lunch. Yes, Mom. Another lie. No, I am not alone at the office. He worked through the night, fueled by determination and gas station coffee from across the street. Each time fatigue threatened to overwhelm him, he thought about Tom and Jerome's sneers, about his mother's pride, about his sister's unwavering faith in her big brother. The first rays of dawn were creeping through the windows when Marcus finally sat back, rubbing his burning eye. On his screen was a complete rebranding package that represented everything he knew about design, everything he'd taught himself during those long hours in the public library. Bill, the security guard, found him asleep at his desk at 6 a.m. Son, you been here all night? Marcus jerked awake, momentarily disoriented. Yes, sir. Had to finish something important. Bill shook his head. Get yourself cleaned up before everyone arrives. And here. He handed Marcus a granola bar from his pocket. Can't face the day on an empty stomach. Marcus headed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie slightly askew. But when he looked in the mirror, he saw something new in his eyes, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there yesterday. The office would soon be full again. Tom and Jerome would arrive with their expensive suits and cruel jokes. The client would be here in 2 hours. But for the first time since stepping into this building, Marcus didn't feel afraid. He had poured everything he had into this project. Whether it succeeded or failed, he had given it his all. And somehow, that knowledge made him stand a little taller as he walked back to his desk, ready to face whatever the day would bring. Little did he know, this day would change everything, not just for him, but for everyone at Wilson & Associates. The stage was set for a moment that would leave everyone speechless, but that story would have to wait for the next chapter. For now, Marcus Johnson sat at his desk, tired but proud, ready to show the world what a 17-year-old kid from the wrong side of town could do when given a chance. The sun rose higher over the city, promising a day that none of them would ever forget. The morning sun filtered through the office windows, finding Marcus still at his desk, nervously reviewing his designs for the 100th time. His eyes burned from staring at the screen all night, and his coffee-steadied hands had finally started to shake. "Marcus? Oh my God, did you stay here all night?" Sarah's voice startled him. She stood there, briefcase in hand, looking at him with a mixture of concern and disbelief. Yeah. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect." His voice was hoarse from lack of sleep. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, setting down her things. "Let me see what you've got." Before Marcus could open his files, familiar laughter echoed through the office. Tom and Jerome strolled in, fresh-pressed suits and matching smirks firmly in place. Well, Tom announced loudly. "Look who's wearing yesterday's clothes. Couldn't afford a change of outfit?" Jerome snickered. "Maybe he's homeless. Should we start a collection?" Sarah's face hardened. "Don't you two have work to do?" "Just making observations," Jerome said innocently. "Hey, Tom, remember that $50 bet?" "Oh, yeah," Tom grinned. "Looking forward to collecting after this morning's presentation." Marcus turned back to his computer, trying to focus on Sarah's presence instead of their taunts. He opened his design files, each one representing hours of careful thought and creativity. Sarah's eyes widened as she scrolled through the work. "Marcus, this is incredible. How did you?" "Had a lot of practice," he said quietly. "Spent most of high school studying design tutorials in the library. They let you use the computers for 2 hours if you have a card." A small crowd had gathered around his desk now, curiosity overcoming their usual indifference. Dave from the creative team let out a low whistle. "Kid, these are professional-level designs. Where did you learn color theory like this?" Marcus thought about the countless YouTube videos he'd watched, the design blogs he'd read on his old phone during bus rides, the practice projects he'd done late at night while his family slept. "Just picked it up along the way," he mumbled. Lisa from accounting leaned in for a closer look. "The typography choices are amazing. It's modern but still feels established and trustworthy." Tom pushed his way through the small crowd. "Oh, please, it's basic at best. The client will laugh this right out of the room." "Actually," Sarah interjected, "I think they're going to love it. Marcus, you should present these yourself." The office went quiet. Marcus felt his heart stop. "Me? But I've never." "You created it all. You understand the thinking behind every decision. Who better to present it?" Tom's face reddened. "You can't be serious. He's an intern. He'll embarrass the whole company." "Like you did with the Henderson account last month?" Lisa muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Jerome stepped forward. "Sarah, this is crazy. The kid probably can't even put 2 sentences together in front of people. No offense," he added with a smirk in Marcus's direction. Marcus thought about his mother's words from just 2 days ago. "Your dignity isn't determined by their ignorance." He straightened in his chair. "I'll do it." Sarah beamed. "Great, the client will be here in." She checked her watch. "45 minutes. Why don't you go freshen up a bit?" "Here is a spare shirt in my office. My brother left it here once. Might fit you." As Marcus headed to the bathroom with the borrowed shirt, he heard Tom and Jerome in heated discussion with Sarah. "This is going to be a disaster." "We'll lose the account." "He's just an intern." Sarah's response was cool. Then I guess you'll both lose your bet. In the bathroom, Marcus changed into the fresh shirt. It was a little big, but tucked in nicely. He splashed cold water on his face and looked at himself in the mirror. The face that stared back was tired, but determined. He thought about his laptop at home, held together with hope and determination. He thought about his little sister Tanya, who believed her big brother could do anything. He thought about his mother, working double shifts to keep them afloat, never losing faith in him. His phone buzzed. A text from his mom. "Hope you are having a good morning, baby. You forgot your lunch on the counter. I'll bring it by later." Marcus typed back quickly. "Thanks, Mama, but lots of work today. I'll grab something here." He couldn't tell her he'd been there all night. Couldn't tell her about the presentation he was about to give. Couldn't tell her how his hands were shaking as he practiced his opening lines in the bathroom mirror. Back at his desk, Marcus found Sarah waiting with a fresh coffee and a protein bar. "Eat," she commanded. "You'll need your energy." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus rehearsed his talking points while Sarah helped him load his presentation onto the conference room system. Other employees drifted by, some offering encouragement, others just staring curiously. Tom and Jerome held court by the water cooler, loudly taking bets on how badly the presentation would go. 20 says he stutters so bad they can't understand him. 30 says he runs out crying. 50 says we lose the account completely. Dave walked past him shaking his head. "You guys are real pieces of work, you know that?" Jerome grinned. "Just keeping it real, Dave. This isn't some diversity training video, this is business." At 8:55 a.m., Sarah's phone buzzed. "They're here. Everyone to the conference room." Marcus gathered his notes, his hands trembling slightly. As he stood, his worn sneakers seemed to mock him from below. Everything else might look presentable, but his shoes told the truth about where he came from. The conference room filled quickly. Marcus sat up at the front, trying to ignore the whispers and stares. Through the glass walls, he could see the clients arriving, 3 men and 2 women, all in impeccable business attire. "Don't worry," Sarah whispered as she passed. "Just breathe and be yourself." The clients entered, followed by several senior partners from the firm. Introductions were made, hands were shaken. Marcus noticed some raised eyebrows when Sarah introduced him as the lead designer. "Well," one of the clients said, settling into his chair, "show us what you've got." Marcus took a deep breath and pressed the button to start his presentation. The room darkened slightly as the first slide appeared on the screen. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today." His voice shook slightly, but he forced himself to continue. He thought about all those nights in the library, all those tutorials, all those practice projects. He knew this material. He had earned this moment. As he moved through the presentation, explaining each design choice, each color selection, each typography decision, something strange happened. The room grew quieter, the smirks faded. Even Tom and Jerome stopped whispering. Marcus showed how he'd maintained the law firm's traditional values while bringing their brand into the modern era. He explained how each element worked together to create a cohesive identity that would work across all platforms. The deep navy blue represents trust and stability, he explained, his voice growing stronger. But we've paired it with a modern golden accent that suggests premium service without being flashy. The font choice. He was in his element now, all nervousness forgotten. This was what he loved, what he'd spent countless hours studying and practicing. The clients leaned forward, engaged. Some were taking notes. When he finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Marcus's heart pounded in his ears. Had he messed up? Said something wrong? Then one of the clients, an older woman with silver hair, spoke up. "Young man, how long have you been designing professionally?" Marcus swallowed hard. "This is my first professional position, ma'am. I am an intern here." Murmurs filled the room. The woman raised her eyebrows. "An intern? Where did you learn to design like this?" "The public library, ma'am. After school. They let you use the computers for 2 hours if you have a card. More murmurs, but different now. The woman turned to her colleagues, who were nodding and talking quietly among themselves. Tom's voice cut through the moment. Of course, this is just a preliminary concept. We can have our senior designers create something more. That won't be necessary. The silver-haired woman interrupted. This is exactly what we're looking for. She turned back to Marcus. You said you learned this all at a public library? Yes, ma'am. YouTube tutorials, free online courses. Used my phone to read design blogs on the bus. She smiled, the first real smile Marcus had seen in the room. Well, it seems dedication and talent can be found in unexpected places. She turned to Sarah. We'll take it. All of it. When can you have the final files ready? The room erupted in shocked whispers. Sarah beamed. We can have everything prepared by the end of the week. As the clients filed out, many stopped to shake Marcus's hand. The silver-haired woman lingered. Keep learning, young man. You have a real gift. Tom and Jerome stood in the corner, faces dark with anger and disbelief. Their $50 bet forgotten in the face of something they hadn't expected. Excellence. Back at his desk, Marcus finally felt the exhaustion hit him. His phone buzzed again. His mother. Baby, I am bringing your lunch by. No arguments. Mama needs to see her boy. Marcus looked at his wrinkled clothes, thought about his all-nighter, about the presentation he'd just given. He texted back. Actually, Mama, I have something to tell you. Sarah appeared at his desk, grinning. Marcus, that was incredible. The partners want to meet with you this afternoon to discuss. She was interrupted by commotion near the elevators. Marcus looked up to see his mother stepping out, lunch bag in hand, still in her nursing scrubs from her night shift. Behind her, Tanya bounced excitedly, her school backpack suggesting she'd convinced their mother to pick her up early. T, here is my baby. His mother called out, ignoring the stares from nearby employees. Bringing you lunch since you forgot. Marcus, have you been here all night? Those are yesterday's clothes. Before Marcus could respond, Sarah stepped forward. Mrs. Johnson, I am Sarah Chen, Marcus's supervisor. Your son just gave an amazing presentation that landed us a major client. The partners would like to meet with him this afternoon to discuss his future with the company. His mother's eyes filled with tears. Tanya squealed and hugged Marcus tight. I told you, she exclaimed. I told you you'd be the best designer they ever saw. Tom and Jerome watched from their corner, their mockery silenced by the scene before them. For once, they had nothing to say. Marcus hugged his mother and sister, no longer caring who saw his tears. He had done it. Not with anger, not with complaints, but with talent, determination, and the unwavering support of the people who believed in him. But as he looked at Sarah's excited face, at his family's proud tears, Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge would come tomorrow and the day after, and every day as he worked to prove that this wasn't a fluke, that a kid from the wrong side of town, armed with nothing but determination and a library card, could compete with the best of them. For now, though, he just held his family close, breathed in his mother's familiar hospital antiseptic smell, and let himself feel the victory. The next chapter of his journey would start soon enough. But this moment, this was his to savor. As his mother fussed over his wrinkled clothes and Tanya explored his desk with wide-eyed wonder, Marcus caught Bill the security guard giving him a thumbs up through the glass doors. Sometimes, he realized, success wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about proving yourself right. But the day was far from over, and Marcus had no idea that his biggest challenges and triumphs were still to come. The partners' meeting that afternoon would set in motion events that would change not just his future, but the culture of Wilson and Associates itself. For now, though, he just smiled as his mother unpacked his lunch, telling everyone within earshot about how her baby boy had always been special. Even as a little kid drawing with crayons on the backs of her old nursing schedules. The office had never seen anything quite like it. A teenage intern in borrowed clothes, his mother in scrubs, his little sister in her school uniform, all celebrating a victory that no one had seen coming. But then again, they'd never seen anyone quite like Marcus Johnson. As Marcus's mother finished unpacking his lunch at his desk, Sarah approached them again, her expression both excited and slightly nervous. "Mrs. Johnson, the partners would like to meet with Marcus in about." She checked her watch. 30 minutes. Would you and your daughter like to wait in our break room? It's more comfortable there. Oh, we should go, his mother said, straightening Marcus's borrowed shirt. You have important meetings now, baby. No, please stay, Marcus said quickly. I mean, if that's okay, Sarah? Of course it is, Sarah smiled. And Mrs. Johnson, I'd love to hear more about Marcus's early artistic endeavors. From across the office, Marcus could see Tom and Jerome huddled with a group of other executives, shooting dark looks in his direction. He caught fragments of their conversation. Beginner's luck. Won't last. Making us look bad. Tanya tugged at his sleeve. Marcus, your computer here is so fancy. Can you show me how it works? Later, baby girl, his mother said. Your brother needs to get ready for his meeting. Dave from the creative team walked over, grinning. That was some presentation, kid. Mind if I take a closer look at those designs while you are with the partners? Before Marcus could answer, Tom's voice cut through the conversation. Really, Dave? Taking design tips from an intern now? Dave turned, his face reddening. Better than taking them from someone who lost the Henderson account, Tom. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Marcus's mother sensed it immediately, her nurse's intuition kicking in. Marcus, baby, you should prepare for your meeting. Tanya and I will wait in that break room Miss Chen mentioned. As Sarah led them away, Marcus could hear Tanya chattering excitedly. Did you see my brother's designs, Miss Chen? He practices all the time at home, even when Mama tells him to go to bed. Lisa appeared at Marcus's desk with a fresh cup of coffee. Thought you might need this. Your family is amazing, by the way. Thanks, Marcus smiled, taking the coffee. They're everything to me. Listen, Lisa lowered her voice. Don't let Tom and Jerome get to you. They're just scared. Scared? Of what? Of you, silly. You just did what their entire department couldn't do for months. Landed the Blackwell account. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of congratulations from some colleagues and cold stares from others. Marcus tried to organize his thoughts for the partners' meeting, but exhaustion was starting to cloud his mind. At exactly 11:30, Sarah returned to his desk. Ready? They're waiting in the main conference room. Marcus stood, his legs shaky from sitting all night. As they walked to the conference room, Sarah squeezed his shoulder. Just be yourself. They already love your work. The conference room felt different now. Instead of clients, 5 partners sat around the massive table, including Mr. Wilson himself, though Marcus didn't know it yet. Their expressions were unreadable. Please, sit down, Mr. Johnson. The oldest partner gestured to a chair. Marcus sat, trying to keep his hands from shaking. That was quite a presentation this morning, another partner began. Sarah tells us you are still in high school? Just graduated, sir. Started college classes in the fall. And you learned design at the public library? Yes, sir. They have computers you can use for 2 hours if you have a card. Yes, we heard. The first partner smiled. Remarkable. Mr. Wilson, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. Tell me, Mr. Johnson, why design? Why not something easier? Marcus thought about it. Nothing worth doing is easy, sir. And design. It's like speaking a language that everyone understands, even if they don't know they do. It can change how people think, feel, act. I wanted to learn that language. The partners exchanged looks. Mr. Wilson nodded slowly. And the comments from certain employees. How do you handle those? Marcus's heart raced. They had heard. Of course they had heard. I focus on the work, sir. My mama always says excellence is the best answer to ignorance. A few partners smiled at that. Mr. Wilson's face remained neutral. You stayed here all night to complete this project. Why? Because it needed to be done, sir. And because. Marcus paused, then decided to be honest. Because some people were betting I would fail. I needed to prove them wrong. Even though you are just an intern? One partner asked, using air quotes. Being just anything is a choice, sir. I choose not to be just anything. The room fell silent. Mr. Wilson stood up suddenly. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We'll be in touch. Please send your mother in on your way out. Marcus's stomach dropped. Had he said something wrong? Was he in trouble for staying overnight? As he walked to the break room, his mind raced with possibilities. He found his mother sharing photos on her phone with Sarah, while Tanya drew on a notepad. Mama, they want to see you, he said quietly. His mother stood immediately, straightening her scrubs. Is everything okay, baby? I don't know. As his mother walked to the conference room, Marcus collapsed into a chair in the break room. The lack of sleep was really hitting him now. Marcus? Tanya's small voice broke through his worry. Look what I drew. She held up her notepad. On it was a stick figure wearing a tie, standing on top of what looked like a building. It's you, she explained, being the boss. He hugged her tight, fighting back tears of exhaustion and emotion. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Sarah tried to distract him with stories about other presentations gone wrong, but Marcus could barely focus. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, his mother emerged from the conference room. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. Mama? Baby, she said, her voice trembling. We need to talk about college tuition. Marcus's heart stopped. What? But before his mother could explain, Tom and Jerome burst into the break room. Johnson, the Blackwell team just called. Here's a problem with the files. A big one. Sarah stood up. What kind of problem? Jerome's face was split by a cruel smile. Seems our Wonder Boy here made some rookie mistakes with the file formatting. Everything's corrupted. Hope you kept your library card, kid. You are gonna need it. And just like that, Marcus's moment of triumph teetered on the edge of disaster. But what happened next would shock everyone, especially Tom and Jerome. The real test wasn't just about design skills anymore. It was about character, resilience, and the kind of courage that can only come from having everything to lose and everything to prove. The break room fell silent after Jerome's announcement. Marcus felt the world spinning around him as fatigue and panic collided. What do you mean corrupted? Sarah demanded, already pulling out her phone. Tom leaned against the doorframe, barely containing his glee. Apparently, when they tried to open the files back at their office, everything was garbled. Amateur mistake, really. Should have known better than to trust an intern with. Show me, Marcus interrupted, standing up despite his exhaustion. His mother grabbed his arm, steadying him. Baby, you haven't slept in over 24 hours. Maybe someone else should. No, Mama. I need to fix this. They moved to Marcus's desk, where Jerome dramatically pulled up the email from the Blackwell team. Marcus read it quickly, his tired eyes struggling to focus. Unable to open several key files. Format compatibility issues. Need resolution ASAP. Sarah was already on the phone with the client. Yes, Mrs. Peterson, I understand. Yes, we'll fix this immediately. No need to look for another agency. Marcus opened his laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as he checked his original files. Everything looked perfect on his end, but then he noticed something. The export settings, he muttered. Their system must be running an older version. Tom snickered. Oh, is that your expert opinion, from all your years of professional experience? Marcus ignored him, focusing instead on his screen. Sarah, can you ask what version of the software they're running? As Sarah relayed the question, Marcus's mother squeezed his shoulder. Baby, you are exhausted. Let someone else handle this. Can't, Mama. My work, my responsibility. Tanya tugged at his sleeve. But Marcus, you haven't eaten your lunch yet. The mention of food made his stomach turn. He'd been running on nothing but determination and gas station coffee for hours. Dave from the creative team approached, concern etched on his face. Kid, maybe Tom's right. Let one of the senior designers. Number. Marcus's voice was firm. I can fix this. I just need. He trailed off as Sarah returned with the information. Just as he suspected, version compatibility issues. A relatively simple fix, but it would take time. Time to re-export everything, check each file, test the compatibility. How long? Sarah asked quietly. Marcus did some quick calculations. 3, maybe 4 hours if I work fast. 4 hours? Jerome laughed. The client needs these files now. Face it, kid, you screwed up. Time to let the professionals handle it. Sarah shot him a look. The same professionals who couldn't land this account in the first place? Tom stepped forward, face reddening. Watch it, Chen. You are getting awful protective of your diversity hire. That's enough. Marcus's mother's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Everyone turned to look at her, surprised by the authority in her tone. My son hasn't slept or eaten properly in 24 hours, and you people are standing here making bets and throwing around insults? She turned to Sarah. Miss Chen, can you tell the client they'll have their files in 4 hours? Mrs. Johnson, Tom started, with all due respect. I wasn't talking to you, she interrupted, fixing him with the kind of look only mothers can give. I was talking to the person in charge. Sarah nodded, already dialing her phone. I'll handle the client. Marcus, what do you need? Just time and coffee, he said, already opening his design software. I'll get the coffee, Tanya volunteered excitedly. Oh, no, you won't, their mother said. You and I are going home. Your brother needs to focus. But, Mom? No buts. Marcus? She turned to her son. You call me the minute you are done. Promise? Promise, Mom. As his family left, Marcus could hear Tanya protesting all the way to the elevator. But I want to see Marcus be awesome again. The next few hours were a blur of focused work. Marcus systematically went through each file, adjusting export settings, checking compatibility, testing and retesting. Sarah kept the client updated on his progress, while keeping Tom and Jerome at bay. Around hour 2, Dave appeared with a sandwich and more coffee. You need to eat something, he said firmly. Can't work if you pass out. Marcus took a small bite, his stomach finally remembering what food was. Thanks. Listen, Dave said, lowering his voice. What you did with this account? Pretty impressive. Don't let those guys get to you. They're just scared. Scared? Of what? Of change. Of someone younger and more talented showing them up. Of having to admit that maybe their assumptions were wrong. Marcus took another bite of the sandwich, thinking about this. From across the office, he could hear Tom and Jerome in another heated discussion with Sarah. This is ridiculous. He's going to make us lose the account completely. We should have stepped in hours ago. The partners are going to hear about this? Sarah's response was cool. Yes, they will. They'll hear how our intern saved the account that our senior team couldn't land in the first place. The hours ticked by. Marcus's eyes burned. His back ached, but his fingers kept moving. Each file had to be perfect. Each export had to be flawless. There would be no second chances. At the 3-hour mark, Lisa from accounting brought him more coffee. How's it going? Almost there, Marcus mumbled, barely looking up. Just need to check the last few files. You know, Lisa said, I've been here 5 years, never seen anyone work this hard on anything. Marcus finally looked up. Really? Really. Especially not Tom or Jerome. They usually delegate everything to junior staff and take the credit. That explained some things. Finally, after 3 hours and 42 minutes, Marcus sat back in his chair. Done. Sarah, who had been hovering nearby, immediately moved to his desk. Everything's fixed? Everything. All files exported in compatible formats, tested on older software versions, double-checked all the settings. Even included a README file explaining how to open everything, just in case. Sarah quickly reviewed the files, then picked up her phone. Mrs. Peterson? Yes. The files are ready. Yes. We tested them thoroughly. Of course. I'll send them right now. The office held its breath as Sarah sent the email. Marcus could barely keep his eyes open, but he forced himself to stay awake. This was the moment of truth. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Then Sarah's phone rang. Mrs. Peterson. Yes, yes. Oh, thank goodness. Of course. Yes, he's right here. She held out the phone to Marcus. She wants to talk to you. With shaking hands, Marcus took the phone. Hello? Young man, Mrs. Peterson's voice was warm. I don't know how you did it, but these files are perfect. Even better than the originals, if that's possible. You included notes, instructions, everything we could need. I've never seen such thorough work. Thank you, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure everything was right. Well, it is, more than right. I'll be speaking with your supervisors about this. Keep up the excellent work. As Marcus handed the phone back to Sarah, he finally let exhaustion take over. His head dropped to his desk, eyes closing despite his best efforts to keep them open. He was vaguely aware of Sarah's voice. Someone get him a ride home. No, Tom, we're not calling him a cab. I'll drive him myself. Dave, can you pack up his thing? The last thing he heard before drifting off was Jerome's disbelieving voice. I don't get it. He's just some kid from the hood. How did he? Then darkness took over, and Marcus finally got the rest he'd earned. Hours later, he awoke in his own bed, still in his borrowed shirt. The sound of voices drifted in from the kitchen. Worked so hard, Mama, Tanya was saying. He didn't even eat his lunch. My baby boy always was stubborn, his mother replied. Just like his father. Marcus checked his phone. Multiple messages from Sarah. Client loves the files. Partners want to meet again tomorrow. Take the morning off. Come in at noon. You did amazing work today. Really amazing. There was even one from Dave. Kid, you just rewrote the rulebook. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Marcus smiled sleepily and was about to drift off again when one more message came through. From an unknown number. This isn't over, Johnson. One lucky break doesn't make you one of us. 2. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, then set his phone aside. Tom was right about one thing. This wasn't over, but not for the reasons Tom thought. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new attempts to break his spirit. But for now, Marcus Johnson, the teenager from the wrong side of town, had proved something important. Excellence doesn't care about your zip code, your age, or the brand of your shoes. As he drifted back to sleep, his mother's words echoed in his mind. Your dignity isn't determined by their ignorance. Tomorrow would be another battle. But tonight, he had earned his rest. What he didn't know was that the next day would bring changes no one at Wilson and Associates could have predicted. The real test of his character, and the moment that would leave everyone truly speechless, was still to come. But those events would unfold in their own time. For now, in a small apartment on the city's east side, a 17-year-old boy slept the sleep of the victorious, while his proud family kept watch and his future hung in the balance. The stage was set for Chapter 4, but that story would have to wait. The best victories, after all, come to those who know how to pace themselves, and Marcus Johnson was just getting started. This was just the beginning of his journey. The real fireworks, the moment that would change everything at Wilson and Associates, was still ahead. But in the quiet of the night, as his mother checked on him one last time and his sister secretly left a glass of water by his bed, none of that mattered. What mattered was that he had faced a challenge and overcome it, not with excuses, not with complaints, but with pure, undiluted excellence. And tomorrow? Well, tomorrow would take care of itself. Morning came too soon, but Marcus felt refreshed after his long sleep. Checking his phone, he saw it was 10:30 a.m., still time before his noon start. "Look who's finally awake," his mother called from the doorway. "How you feeling, baby?" "Better, Mama, much better." She sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his covers like she used to when he was little. "Your sister's been telling everyone at her school about her genius brother. The one who stayed up all night to save the day." Marcus groaned. "Mama, it wasn't that dramatic." "Oh no? Because Miss Chen called this morning. Told me everything." She fixed him with a look. "About Tom and Jerome, too." "Mama, don't worry about." "I am your mother. Worrying is my job." She paused. But being proud? That's my privilege. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another message from Sarah. Partners meeting at 2 p.m. Don't worry about dressing up. Just bring yourself and your laptop. His mother saw his expression change. What is it? Another meeting with the partners. He showed her the message. Well then, she stood up. Businesslike. Let's get you ready. And this time, you are eating breakfast first. In the kitchen, Tanya had already left for school, but she'd drawn him another picture, this time of him working at his computer, surrounded by what looked like rays of light. She stayed up late drawing that, his mother said, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. Said her brother's a superhero now. Marcus ate quickly, then got ready for work. This time he wore his own shirt, freshly ironed by his mother despite his protests, and his father's tie. The worn sneakers were still the only shoes he had, but somehow they bothered him less today. He arrived at the office at 11:45, stepping off the elevator to find a very different atmosphere than yesterday. People who had never noticed him before now smiled and nodded. Even Bill, the security guard, gave him a proud thumbs up. There he is, Dave called out as Marcus approached his desk. The guy who pulled off the impossible. It wasn't impossible, Marcus said, setting down his laptop. Just needed some extra time. And extra caffeine, Lisa added, walking by with a fresh cup of coffee for him. The whole office is talking about how you stayed up all night to fix those files. The whole office needs to mind its own business. Tom's sharp voice cut through as he strode past. One all-nighter doesn't make you a professional, Johnson. Jerome followed close behind. Yeah, don't let it go to your head, kid. You got lucky twice. Won't happen again. But their words seemed to carry less weight today. Other employees rolled their eyes as they passed, and Marcus heard someone mutter, "Sore loser." Sarah appeared at his desk, grinning. Ready for your big meeting? Any hints about what it's about? Nope, but I would open that email from Mrs. Peterson if I were you. Marcus quickly checked his inbox. The client had sent a long email praising not just his designs, but his professionalism in handling the file crisis. She specifically mentioned how impressed she was with his initiative and attention to detail. Not bad for a kid from the hood, huh? Dave said, reading over his shoulder. The next 2 hours passed quickly as Marcus caught up on other work. He could feel Tom and Jerome watching him, probably waiting for him to make a mistake, but he stayed focused. At 1:55, Sarah came to escort him to the partners' meeting. As they walked to the conference room, she squeezed his shoulder. Whatever happens in there, Marcus, know that you've already proved yourself, more than proved yourself. The partners were all there again, including Mr. Wilson. But this time, there was someone new, Mrs. Peterson herself. Mr. Johnson, she smiled warmly. Please, sit down. Marcus sat, trying to calm his racing heart. What was the client doing here? Mr. Wilson spoke first. Mr. Johnson, we've been reviewing your performance over the past few days. Your initial presentation, your handling of the file crisis, your general attitude and work ethic. Marcus held his breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But that story, the moment that would truly leave everyone speechless, would have to wait for Chapter 4. Because sometimes, the biggest victories come when you least expect them, and the best moments of triumph need time to build. For now, Marcus sat in that conference room, unaware that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. The real test of his character, and the moment that would transform Wilson and Associates forever, was just minutes away. The conference room felt smaller than ever as Marcus sat before the partners and Mrs. Peterson. His father's tie suddenly felt too tight, and he was acutely aware of his worn sneakers under the table. Mr. Wilson cleared his throat. Mr. Johnson, before we continue, Mrs. Peterson has something she'd like to say. The silver-haired woman smiled warmly. Young man, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've worked with design firms across the country, seen countless presentations, reviewed thousands of portfolios. She paused, letting her words sink in. But I've never seen anyone handle a crisis the way you did yesterday. Marcus shifted in his chair, unsure how to respond. Through the glass walls, he could see a small crowd gathering. Sarah, Dave, and Lisa stood close together, while Tom and Jerome lingered near the back, their faces dark with suspicion. Thank you, ma'am, Marcus managed. I just wanted to make it right. Make it right? Mrs. Peterson laughed softly. Young man, you didn't just make it right. You turned a potential disaster into a masterclass in problem solving and client service. One of the partners leaned forward. Tell us something, Mr. Johnson. Why didn't you just go home when your shift ended? Why stay all night? Marcus thought about it. Because. He straightened in his chair, finding his voice. Because when you are given an opportunity, you don't waste it. Not even a minute of it. Through the glass, he saw his mother step off the elevator with Tanya. Sarah quickly moved to greet them, whispering something that made his mother's hand fly to her mouth. Mr. Wilson stood up slowly, commanding attention without saying a word. Mr. Johnson, when we hired you as an intern, we expected you to learn from us. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Instead, you've taught us something important. Sir, you've shown us that talent and determination don't come with a pedigree or a zip code. Mr. Wilson walked to the glass wall, looking out at the gathered employees. Some people in this office made bets against you. They mocked your clothes, your background, your shoes. Marcus felt his face burn. Tom and Jerome shifted uncomfortably in the background. They didn't believe you belonged here, Mr. Wilson continued. They saw what they wanted to see, just another diversity hire, just another quota filled. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the usual office noise had ceased as everyone strained to hear. But you know what I see, Mr. Johnson? Mr. Wilson turned back to face him. I see a young man who taught himself design using library computer, who worked through the night to solve a problem he didn't create, who faced mockery with grace and prejudice with excellence. Mrs. Peterson nodded approvingly. The Blackwell Group doesn't just need a design firm, Mr. Wilson. We need people who care about getting things right. People like Marcus. Mr. Wilson pressed a button on the conference room phone. Send them in, please. The glass door opened, and Sarah ushered in Marcus's mother and sister. Tanya was practically bouncing with excitement, but their mother's face was a mix of pride and nervous anticipation. Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Wilson smiled. Thank you for coming. We wanted you here for this. For what? Marcus asked, his heart pounding. Mr. Wilson held up a document. Marcus Johnson, we would like to offer you a position as a junior designer at Wilson & Associates. Full-time, with complete benefits and a college tuition assistance program. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Tanya squealed, I knew it, while their mother's eyes filled with tears. But Mr. Wilson wasn't finished. Furthermore, we'd like you to lead a new mentorship program, helping other young people learn design through our partnership with local library. Marcus sat stunned, unable to process what he was hearing. Through his daze, he heard Tom's voice from the door. This is ridiculous. He's just a kid. You can't. I believe. Mrs. Peterson cut in sharply. That's exactly the kind of attitude that almost lost you the Blackwell account. Perhaps you could learn something from this kid, Mr. Phillip. Jerome stepped forward. Mr. Wilson, you can't be serious. What about experience? What about the $50 you owe me? Dave called out from the crowd. Since Marcus didn't fail after all. Laughter rippled through the gathered employees. Tom and Jerome's faces turned red as they realized their game of prejudice and mockery had finally caught up with them. Mr. Wilson held up his hand for silence. Marcus has shown us that experience isn't just about years in the industry. It's about dedication, innovation, and character. He turned to Marcus. So, what do you say? Marcus looked at his mother, who was crying openly now, at Tanya, who beamed with unshakable confidence in her big brother, at Sarah, who had believed in him from the start. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Peterson, thank you, but I have one condition. The room held its breath. Even Tom and Jerome looked curious despite themselves. Those library computers? The ones with the 2-hour limit? Marcus's voice grew stronger. They're old, slow. If we're really going to help other kids learn design, they need better tools. Mrs. Peterson broke into a wide smile. The Blackwell Group would be honored to donate new computers to every public library in the city. Consider it done. Mr. Wilson extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Mr. Johnson, officially. As Marcus shook his hand, the office burst into applause. Lisa and Dave cheered. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Even some of the partners looked emotional. His mother pulled him into a tight hug. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. Tanya tugged at his sleeve. "Does this mean you can buy new shoes now?" Everyone laughed, the tension breaking. Even Marcus couldn't help but smile, looking down at his worn sneakers, the shoes that had carried him this far. Tom and Jerome stood awkwardly by the door, their world of comfortable prejudices crumbling around them. They had bet against a kid from the wrong side of town, and they had lost spectacularly. As the celebration continued, Sarah approached with a small package. "This came for you this morning, from the library." Marcus opened it to find a brand new library card, marked Lifetime Member, and a note from the head librarian, "For the boy who turned 2 hours into a future. Keep designing, keep dreaming, keep proving them wrong." Later that evening, as Marcus sat in his family's small kitchen, still in his father's tie but now with a full-time job and a future he had only dreamed of, he thought about everything that had happened. His mother was on the phone, telling relatives the good news. Tanya was drawing pictures of what she thought his new office would look like. And Marcus? He was opening his laptop, the same one his family had pooled their money to buy, ready to start designing the future. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. And in that small kitchen, with his mother's proud tears and his sister's boundless faith, with a new library card in his pocket and his father's tie around his neck, Marcus Johnson had done exactly that. The kid from the wrong side of town hadn't just survived in the corporate world, he had changed it. Not with anger or bitterness, but with talent, determination, and the kind of excellence that transcends all barriers. As for Tom and Jerome, well, they learned a valuable lesson. Never bet against someone who has nothing to lose and everything to prove. And Wilson and Associates? They got more than just a talented young designer. They got a reminder that greatness can come from anywhere, and that sometimes the most valuable assets walk in wearing worn-out sneakers and borrowed shirts. But most importantly, Marcus Johnson proved that dignity isn't determined by other people's ignorance, it's determined by how you rise above it. And rise he did, higher than anyone had expected, changing not just his own future but the futures of countless other kids who would now have better computers, better opportunities, and living proof that their dreams were valid too. All because one teenager refused to let others define his worth, refused to let mockery defeat his spirit, and refused to be just anything except exactly who he was meant to be. Marcus looked at his mother, who was crying openly now, at Tanya, who beamed with unshakable confidence in her big brother, at Sarah, who had believed in him from the start. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. "Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Peterson, thank you, but I have one condition." The room held its breath. Even Tom and Jerome looked curious despite themselves. "Those library computers? The ones with the 2-hour limit?" Marcus's voice grew stronger. "They're old, slow. If we're really going to help other kids learn design, they need better tools." Mrs. Peterson broke into a wide smile. The Blackwell Group would be honored to donate new computers to every public library in the city. Consider it done. Mr. Wilson extended his hand. "Welcome to the team, Mr. Johnson, officially." As Marcus shook his hand, the office burst into applause. Lisa and Dave cheered. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Even some of the partners looked emotional. His mother pulled him into a tight hug. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. Tanya tugged at his sleeve. "Does this mean you can buy new shoes now?" Everyone laughed, the tension breaking. Even Marcus couldn't help but smile, looking down at his worn sneakers, the shoes that had carried him this far. Tom and Jerome stood awkwardly by the door, their world of comfortable prejudices crumbling around them. They had bet against a kid from the wrong side of town, and they had lost spectacularly. As the celebration continued, Sarah approached with a small package. "This came for you this morning, from the library." Marcus opened it to find a brand new library card, marked Lifetime Member, and a note from the head librarian. "For the boy who turned 2 hours into a future. Keep designing, keep dreaming, keep proving them wrong." Later that evening, as Marcus sat in his family's small kitchen, still in his father's tie, but now with a full-time job and a future he had only dreamed of, he thought about everything that had happened. His mother was on the phone, telling relatives the good news. Tanya was drawing pictures of what she thought his new office would look like. And Marcus? He was opening his laptop, the same one his family had pooled their money to buy, ready to start designing the future. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. And in that small kitchen, with his mother's proud tears and his sister's boundless faith, with a new library card in his pocket and his father's tie around his neck, Marcus Johnson had done exactly that. The kid from the wrong side of town hadn't just survived in the corporate world, he had changed it. Not with anger or bitterness, but with talent, determination, and the kind of excellence that transcends all barriers. As for Tom and Jerome, well, they learned a valuable lesson. Never bet against someone who has nothing to lose and everything to prove. And Wilson and Associates? They got more than just a talented young designer. They got a reminder that greatness can come from anywhere, and that sometimes the most valuable assets walk in wearing worn-out sneakers and borrowed shirts. But most importantly, Marcus Johnson proved that dignity isn't determined by other people's ignorance. It's determined by how you rise above it. And rise he did, higher than anyone had expected, changing not just his own future, but the futures of countless other kids who would now have better computers, better opportunities, and living proof that their dreams were valid too. All because one teenager refused to let others define his worth, refused to let mockery defeat his spirit, and refused to be just anything except exactly who he was meant to be.